sleeve, going out for runs, doing mixed martial arts, and I saw you challenge Trump at one point. You're like, yeah. I saw that.
No, well, yeah, I'm doing my mixed martial arts. I brought my bands and working out, and Daniel Hoffman works out there's a pool right behind me. We're on the roof of this building.
And
he swims like 3 miles before the show every night.
Exercise regimen. Good for you. Well, first of all, great interview. Great get. I'm very jealous, but, I love you, so I'm rooting for you all the way.
Well, you could have flown 22 hours with us, but I can't even get home till the end of the week.
Oh, well, fantastic job, Sean. And be careful. Get home
thanks.
safely.
Have a great show.
We miss you here in the United States. All right, you take care. And good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle. What a fantastic show we have tonight. From Trump's Singapore sensation to big news we are breaking here tonight on the DOJ's relationship with Congress. Tonight, we're going to break down how Trump baffled the experts, going from the brink of war to a stunning diplomatic triumph. We'll also show you some hilarious moments of the big summit that might have gotten past you. Raymond Arroyo will break it all down for us. Plus, exclusively on the Angle, Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan are here to break some major news, as I said, on that DOJ document production and what may be coming for Rod Rosenstein. But first, pride, bitterness, and the refusal to give peace a chance. That's the focus of tonight's Angle. Remember when the left was all about love, peace, and understanding? All we are saying is give peace a chance. Oh, come on, you remember all those great musical numbers at those No Nukes concerts back in the late 70s, the early 80s, like Jackson Browne? I mean, this was awesome time. Well, the left thought we should stop being so belligerent toward the Soviet Union. We should engage with the Soviets, all for a better world. Now, some even admired the Castros in Cuba, and they flirted with Marxist ideology here at home. So one would have thought that many of those same people and their ideological offspring would view President Trump's summit with Kim Jong-un as a moment to savor a real chance at creating a more peaceful planet. But no. And you know why? Because the man doing the outreach and negotiating is Donald J. Trump. Before, during, and after his whirlwind trip to Singapore for the Kim meeting, his critics in both parties kept revealing themselves. Their narratives, if you notice, kept shifting. 6 months ago, it was this.
The lack of a diplomatic and serious engagement strategy, in my view, has us sliding toward war by next summer.
Trump's comments about nuclear weapons have experts worried he could literally inadvertently trigger a catastrophe.
Warning that his reckless behavior could launch the nation on the path to World War III.
You are all wrong. Every one of you, we don't have enough time to list you all, were wrong. But this tyranny of being wrong by the experts is nothing new. Because after all, they were wrong about the election of Donald Trump, the economy of Donald Trump, the pro-life commitment of Donald Trump, and the trade policies of Donald Trump, just to name a few. So naturally, as the summit began, the Error Caucus offered this trenchant analysis.
Donald Trump can relate to authoritarians. He, as a former businessman, he likes absolute control, and
is he a wannabe despot?
I've conceded that for years now.
It's really interesting because the more we're talking about North Korea, the less we're talking about Russia.
This is not just a meeting about foreign policy. This is about Donald Trump's political survival. That's their midterm message. That's all they've got.
Wait a second. That's all they've got? Says the woman who brought us the winning campaign of John McCain in 2008? Oh, okay. So I guess record low unemployment, a thriving economy, tax cuts, the destruction of ISIS, and now a foreign policy coup that has eluded multiple administrations is all they've got. But even after Trump brought Kim to Singapore, even after he squeezed concessions and at least a commitment to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. The left still will not give him a shred of credit.
Well, Donald Trump, the real estate developer, and he doesn't realize that this dictator doesn't want beach condos. He wants nuclear weapons.
Empty words, potentially empty words, and lots of flags and lots of ceremony don't necessarily lead to the consequences that we hope for.
Are we going ahead with just some hopeful, wishful thoughts? And I find that incredibly worrying, incredibly depressing.
There's no knowledge of history. It's staggering to every day to realize how unself-aware and the lack of knowledge.
The lack of knowledge. I don't recall most of these same media elites griping about embracing dictators when Barack Obama restored ties with the Castros in Cuba, or when he gave hundreds of millions of dollars to the dictators in Iran for a bogus denuclearization deal, or when he held a state dinner for the Chinese dictator. The selective moral outrage here is galling, predictable, and oh so blatant. When Trump talks tough, they say he's a warmonger, taking us right to war. But when he gets bad guys to sit at the negotiating table and begin to hammer out a peace framework, he's savage for embracing a dictator. So which is it, guys? They beat him up for saying that he trusts Kim, that Kim actually wants to make a change. But Trump himself said, listen carefully, he could be wrong.
I think he's going to do these things. I may be wrong.
Yeah, he said, I'll have to come back and apologize. I wouldn't like it, though. And let's face it, even with the high stakes involved here, really serious, possibly deadly consequences of failure, President Trump makes geopolitics fun again.
I may stand before you in 6 months and say, hey, I was wrong. I don't know that I'll ever admit that, but I'll find some kind of an excuse.
Come on, even some of the doubters had to laugh a little bit. Have some fun. This is a great time to be an American. Like, who else could have gotten us to this point?
I mean, he said openly, and he said it to a couple of reporters that were with him, that he knows that no other president ever could have done this.
Well, okay, so he's got a big ego. What president doesn't? Big deal. Isn't Trump's path better than the alternative that the elites were warning us about 6 months ago? I mean, a North Korea that is so isolated that it might think to do the unthinkable, hit an American city with an ICBM. So I say, let them distract us all they like. Let them keep going, flapping their lips about this. Let them lie and contradict their own analyses. While their audience and readership shrink, and they basically just tune them out, more Americans, I think, are seeing through the media manipulation. And Trump, both at home and abroad, is undeterred by their static. He's too busy winning. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction here in Washington is Christian Wyden. He's a former State Department senior advisor in both the George W. Bush and Donald Trump administrations, and the Washington Examiner's Byron York, who is also a Fox News contributor. You were both swaying back and forth at the Give Peace a Chance. Byron, I remember seeing you with those Bic lighters at Jackson Brown, at the 79. You were at the RFK Stadium tour, right? Come on.
I tried to destroy all those pictures.
Exactly. I blurred you out, Christian. You were there, too. But it is wild, is it not, that this is the Give Peace a Chance crowd. We've got to lower the temperature with the Soviet Union. They didn't like Reagan's tough talk against the Soviets. They didn't like Bush's evil empire. But now you have a guy who kind of, like, we'll see how it goes. But this is an amazing first step that he will never, ever, ever get an ounce of credit for. And I think he shouldn't expect it at this point.
He should not. I think what they failed to recognize, you played these sound bites of them reacting to back when he was talking really tough, talking about Little Rocket Man, he was talking about Fire and Fury. I think what they have not recognized, or maybe won't acknowledge, is that kind of provocative talk led to this summit. As a matter of fact, the president even talked about it in the Sean Hannity interview. He said, in the past, when North Korea did something provocative, American presidents were too silent. He felt that was the wrong way to do it. He said sometimes he felt a little foolish going over the top with some of this stuff, but he wanted to get to a place where they felt, the North Koreans felt they had to talk.
Christian, Hannity asked him about the rhetoric. Let's watch.
Well, I think without the rhetoric, we wouldn't have been here. I really believe that. You know, we did sanctions and all of the things that you would do, but I think without the rhetoric, you know, other administrations, I don't want to get specific on that, but they had a policy of silence. If they said something very bad and very threatening and horrible, just don't answer. That's not the answer. That's not what you have to do. So I think the rhetoric, I hated to do it. Sometimes I felt foolish doing it. But we had no choice.
Christian, to hear him admit that he ripped up the old diplomatic playbook and he decided to do it a totally different way. And all the elites, the Council on Foreign Relations crowd, the Brookings Institution, they have all their pedigrees, their educational pedigrees. Trump comes in there and says, this can't be that hard. I know it's complicated, but this guy's got to want something from us. What can we give him? What could we give up that won't be detrimental to U.S. interests in the end? We'll see how it goes.
That's right. So many liberals just think that diplomacy is telling foreigners what they want to hear and actually telling the truth, what Donald Trump did. Also, Reagan got a lot of heat from that for saying that the Soviet empire was an evil empire and calling for Gorbachev to tear down the wall. The experts, the bedwetters up at the Council on Foreign Relations and the Harvard Kennedy School all said, you can't say that. He did. And it gets through. Dictators understand that truth can actually play an important role in diplomacy.
Byron, Dana Bash today at CNN had an interesting analysis. Let's watch.
There would be a call for impeachment, and it would be the worst thing in the world if a Democratic president not just sat down, but gave all of the pomp and circumstance, the sort of diplomatic bells and whistles that President Trump gave to Kim. Not just rhetorically, but the flag placed on equal footing to the American flag, things like that.
Byron.
I don't buy that. I mean, I just don't buy that. By the way, President Obama opened up relations with Cuba, and he was not impeached. I think on the rhetoric, there's another thing that we need to remember, which is the rhetoric was actually backed up with a credible threat of force. Remember how we've heard so many people say that war on the Korean Peninsula was not an option, that it was unthinkable. Well, the Trump team was thinking about it.
He made a calculation.
They were going through military options, and they had to have Kim Jong-un believe that they were seriously considering those military options before Kim would move to this point.
And wasn't it important, Christian, in the end, for this president to make it clear that he wasn't bound by the old way of doing things? And I think that's what I call the angle. A lot of it's about pride. Pride is one of the sins that we all have to work on. But the pride of these experts being shown up by a guy that they thought, he's so unsophisticated, he's not as educated as we are, he's plenty well educated. He doesn't read, he doesn't study the Peloponnesian Wars or Sun Tzu at night. And it turns out that he has a street smart sense that is unlike, frankly, anything I've seen in politics. Maybe Reagan, probably the closest one. Clinton had a good sense. But he has an uncanny ability to read someone. And he said, I read him pretty fast. It's wild, but it brought us to this point, and it is far superior to the alternative.
Right. He's brought common sense into the equation, something any American who's bought a used car understands in negotiation. If the person who's selling it to you knows you can't take no for an answer, you're going to buy no matter what, then you're not going to get a good deal. Donald Trump's willingness to walk away. Remember, the expert said he shouldn't meet with Kim, and then he scheduled a hearing and they said that he shouldn't cancel it. But that move where he was willing to walk away, that anyone knows, if you're getting a bad deal, walk away. He did that. He's still willing to do that. And that's the key difference between this set of negotiations in the Clinton era and Bush era negotiations that failed.
There are a few people. Donna Brazile said this is a good moment. I mean, she tweeted out something. There are a few Democrats. We've got to give them due. But Chuck Schumer today was not impressed on the Senate floor. I mean, they're not giving him a moment. I think they do think it's gonna be a plus for him come the midterm elections.
Well, he also had a very simple insight that's so hard for people to come to, which is he saw that North Korea was an intractable problem. presidents of both parties have not been able to figure this out, and he had the amazing idea that perhaps he should try something different. Doesn't mean it's going to work, and I do think there's a lot of questions after this. We don't know if Kim is going to do what he says he's going to do. There's evidence to suggest he's not going to do it. We'll see what happens. But it was very clear that with this problem, you had to try something new.
It is, I think, I'm just going to keep saying, I still can't believe it is a stunning development. Everyone throwing, a wet blanket on it. Again, we're cautiously optimistic, but it's better than the alternative. And they said he would do the opposite, the so-called expert class. Fantastic, guys. And let's get some insight now from someone with a unique perspective on this. Jim Woolsey, he was the CIA director in 1994 when President Clinton struck a deal that was supposed to end North Korea's nuke program. So, Jim, it's great to see you, first of all. What might be different this time, given everything you've witnessed over the last 7 or 8 months, this president's style, his approach, and what you saw from Kim yesterday?
I think President Trump has put the North Koreans under pressure in a way that they did not remotely expect. He sort of played good cop, bad cop, and then he's taken both roles. Sometimes he's a good cop and he's saying friendly and laudatory things about Kim Jong-un. And at other times he's talking about fire and fury and so forth. He keeps them off balance. And I don't think, had a very good idea about how to deal with his style of negotiating, which I must admit did not initially attract me. But a lot of people who were not initially attracted to it are beginning to see it work and kind of scratching their heads and saying, hey, maybe I was wrong on this and maybe he was right.
Jim, Leon Panetta was very concerned about a month and a half ago in mid-April about what he viewed the president to be in terms of, provocative, way too provocative in dealing with this dangerous power. Let's watch.
The words from the administration are creating even higher volume in terms of the provocations that are going on. I think we've got to be careful here. This is, we shouldn't engage in any precipitous action. There's a reason no U.S. president in recent history has pulled the trigger on North Korea.
That was in April of 2017, just to be clear, but it is a year after plus a month or so, month and a half. And here we are, again, the beginning of a framework that was reconfirmed in another brief message that came out a few hours ago that they are committed to doing this. What are the pitfalls for this administration going forward? The ability to obviously do inspections and so forth. How do we verify?
Verification is tough on undertakings like this. We could probably do it if we have the right kind of cooperation from Kim Jong-un and his people, because they have sideswiped the effort to undertake serious inspections before the North Koreans have. The Iranians were extraordinarily duplicitous in steering everybody away from anything that was interesting to look at under their agreement that was signed and happily then taken apart by President Trump. I think the one situation I'm the most concerned about, not because I'm really worried about it, but because it's so important, is China. With a cooperative China, we'll work this out. But with China that believes that they have to stand up to us in the South China Sea or what, we could stumble here. But so far, I've got to say that my wife's prognostication that President Trump was going to A, get elected, and B, reign and rule the way he has, I couldn't believe it, and she had it right and I had it wrong.
Well, that's a man that we like. All we women love to hear that, Jim. Thank you so much for your thoughts. So important to get them tonight. And in the wake of yesterday's summit, Trump critics, of course, they won't give the president a break.
We had this debate this morning in our meeting. Is American exceptionalism dead in the era of Donald Trump?
Oh my gosh, a history lesson for Chuck and many other critics. Next.
It's the Father's Day sale at Ace. Save $100 on what Dad really wants.
Some say Democrats are in full-blown denial over the Singapore summit. They're refusing to concede that President Trump actually did something kind of good, any success at all, much less a potentially historic breakthrough with North Korea.
What the United States has gained is vague and unverifiable at best. What North Korea has gained, however, is tangible and lasting. We have legitimized a brutal dictator who has starved his own people.
I have to be honest with you, this is the weakest statement I have ever seen come out of any engagement with North Korea.
Bob, it's called the beginning of the process of peace. Well, just look at Reagan and Gorbachev. And I actually worked in the Reagan administration when Gorbachev came for the first time. I remember seeing the car pull up. It was unbelievable. Well, they held 4 summits during Reagan's second term. So let's get some big picture perspective with Reagan biographer Craig Shirley, former Hillary Clinton advisor Richard Goodstein, and Republican Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin. Great to have all of you on the panel. Richard, your take on this. There's a lot of concern on the part of Democrats. My theory is the concern is they're worried that the guy who they said was going to blow up the world is actually perhaps going to maybe save the Korean Peninsula.
So I think every Democrat worth their salt gives the president credit for trying to do something here. The problem they have is not for trying, it's for what he's done. He's basically got a nothing burger of a deal, something that Korean leaders have agreed to for decades, and in exchange, and he's called Kim, who starves and murders and puts his people in labor camps and so forth, he's called him very talented and funny and trustworthy. The problem is that hurts the U.S. around the world when the president can't observe and call out what somebody is, right? That's the problem.
Did Obama do that with the Chinese president? When we literally rolled out the red carpet, literally.
The Chinese president...
Hundreds of thousands of people in re-education camps in China. You see what they do to the churches in China?
Right.
You know what they do to the women? They rip babies out of their wombs.
Right.
We had them for a state dinner, Richard. We rolled out the red carpet for the Chinese president. I didn't hear Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Democrats, most Democrats, a few did, but not most Democrats. They didn't give a whit
So I guess
about
when
China.
Nixon opened the doors to China, well, I don't know whether you were in the punditry field. Were you
No,
making
I
the
was
same
in junior
complaint?
high.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying.
Not even in junior high.
You know, Republicans, whether it was Nixon, Ford, et cetera, Reagan, they were trying to kind of deal with China as well. So to lay this at Obama is a bit much, right?
It's a double standard.
The problem is that we're suspending our military exercises, something that Kim and his father and his grandfather and the Russians and the Chinese were pleading to get done.
But Lord, so I think we have to, the hypocrisy coming from Democrats right now. So Barack Obama goes to Cuba and has a baseball game with Raul Castro, a ruthless dictator. Not only that, he sends billions of dollars and pallets full of cash to the Iranian mullahs, opens up American banking system to them. You can't get that money back, Richard.
He tried.
But you can't. And so the double standard here, Donald Trump, as you mentioned, Laura, this is the first of 9 innings. This is the first foray into peace. And by the way, Democrats, when Donald Trump said, hey, listen, fire and fury, and my button is bigger than yours, they were like, he's a warmonger. But all of a sudden, he has a peace summit, and they're freaking out that he's weak and going to give the store away.
Well, we've tried a lot of things. I'm going to get Craig Shirley into this. Craig, you're a Reagan biographer extraordinaire. Anyone who wants to understand Reagan has to read your books, all of them. Susan Glasser of The New Yorker today was on, I believe it was MSNBC, if my memory serves me right, and she was talking about the Reagan comparison. Let's watch.
Reagan did exactly the opposite of what we're talking about with Trump. He was able to find a way to negotiate with the Soviets, to be extremely tough with the Soviets, and also to preserve a line and a vision of human rights and democracy and what America is about.
So Trump obviously...
She's exactly wrong.
Tell us why.
She's exactly wrong, because both Trump talked tough and then engaged the enemy. Ronald Reagan talked tough about the Soviet, then engaged the enemy. Is that they understood is that you do have to deal with it from a position of strength, but that doesn't mean you don't negotiate or don't talk. You know, Reagan and Gorbachev had 4 summits, two of which were just basically photo ops. The substantive one was in Moscow, where Reagan actually met with human rights dissidents there and gave an important speech at Moscow State University, and then, of course, in Washington, where they signed an agreement to limit intermediate range nuclear missiles. But sometimes you have to just talk in order to reach an achievement, reach an agreement.
Well, a lot of people, Craig and Sean and Richard, were upset that the president didn't spend more time on human rights. Let's watch what the president said to Sean Hannity about this.
Did humanitarian issues come up in the meeting?
Yes, it did. And one of the things I will tell you that I'm most happy about, and that, as you know, is a big sticking point, is bringing back the remains of thousands of soldiers that were killed.
This came up last minute. This wasn't...
This was sort of last minute, yeah. I said, would it be possible? Because I get letters all the time from families who lost a son, lost a brother, lost a father in Korea. That was a rough fight.
The president said in a different interview, talking about human rights abuses in North Korea, he said, well, there's human rights abuses in other places, which is reminiscent of the way he said about Putin, who was a thug, oh, other people do bad things, or frankly, his equivocating on Charlottesville. Why can't he call out, there's a problem here? I'm not saying it should supersede. Nuclear is an existential issue, no question about it, and if he can solve it, kudos to him. He deserves a Nobel Prize, although, frankly, what he did to the Western Alliance to undo that, frankly, I think kind of will hurt his Nobel Prize application.
Listen, human rights are important, but first things first, the nuclear threat to the world is incredibly dangerous.
How many people would die if an American city was hit by a long-range nuclear missile?
Millions of
Hundreds
people.
of thousands,
so
at least.
Let's deal with the first threat, which is nuclear weapons. Let's go to the second issue, which is human rights. But you can't say that we've dealt with human rights in Cuba or in Iran or anywhere else with Obama, and no one ever complained about that. So again, I think let's take this off the table and deal with the bigger issues.
Craig, Craig, you can't do everything at once, although it's tempting. No. We all want to get it all done. Like we're like yesterday. And Trump's very impatient for change. I say this all the time. I mean that in a good way. He's extremely impatient. But he also sees you got to give someone a way out, a graceful way out. Even if it's a horrible person, you've got to give them a way of, like, going back to his own people saying, I wasn't completely humiliated there. I think that's what he's thinking. Your reaction, close it out.
Laura, don't you find it ironic that the left is berating Donald Trump for showing good manners in Singapore? That's screamingly hilarious to me. Is that, when Reagan gave his speech, the Berlin Wall in 1987, it kind of fell with a thud. None of the three networks led with it. The Washington media did not report it. Der Spiegel wrote a couple months afterwards. It was a speech written by amateurs. It only became important in the context of history because 3 years later, the Berlin Wall did fall. Is that what Trump did today and what he's done over in Singapore might not be historically important in the long run, but it depends on what happens now in the succeeding days, weeks, and months ahead. Is that if North Korea denuclearizes, if trade is opened up, if a new era of freedom is ushered in there or something like that, then people will look at this and say this was historic.
The sweep of history will reveal all of you. It's great to have you on. Spirited and great conversation. In just a moment, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan are joining me to break major news on their effort to make the DOJ turn over documents to Congress, and we'll bring you the funniest, yes, funniest moments of the summit with Raymond Arroyo. Stay right there.
Lord God, give us rain.
A stunning report from Fox News' Catherine Herridge tonight. Documents showing that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein threatened to subpoena emails, phone records, and other documents belonging to members of the House Intel Committee. Attorney General Jeff Sessions came to Rosenstein's defense earlier tonight.
I'm confident that Deputy Rosenstein, 28 years in the Department of Justice, did not improperly threaten anyone on that occasion. But we do believe that we have tried to be cooperative with them and made progress in months as the months have gone by, and in fact have had some good relationships with top members of Congress.
With the war between the DOJ and Congress heating up, two lawmakers join us tonight to make a major announcement exclusively on The Angle. Here are Oversight Committee members Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. Jim, what do you think about what you just heard from the Attorney General?
You're almost flabbergasted. I mean,
what is the Attorney General saying? Rod Rosenstein hasn't complied with Devin Nunes' subpoena, hasn't complied with Chairman Goodlatte's subpoena. We've caught them hiding information in the Strzok page text messages, redacting the fact that Peter Strzok was friends with Judge Contreras, one of the FISA court judges. They tried to hide that from us. And today we learned in Catherine's report that the head of in essence, the head of the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, was threatening members of the House Intelligence Committee for doing their job, for trying to get answers for the American people. And the Attorney General says that's okay, we're doing just fine. I didn't know he had said that. When you just played that, I'm like, are you kidding me? This report of Catherine is unbelievable. When you have the head of the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, saying he's going to go after staff members' emails and communications.
Going after he wants your BlackBerry.
We're doing our constitutional duty as
Mark,
that's scary.
Yeah, Mark, Congressman Meadows, what I think he's saying is that if you guys hold him in contempt, he's going to have to defend himself. And part of the defense will be he wants discovery. He wants to know who you've been talking to, who you've been talking to. He wants to know your text messages. You know, maybe they won't redact your documents like they did the page and Strzok text.
Right. There's two problems with it, Laura. One is that we're a separate branch of government. Yeah. They don't have the right to do that unless we're coming under some kind of criminal investigation. And for the Attorney General to say he's confident that Rod Rosenstein did everything right? Well, I'm confident he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm here to tell you, we're fed up with it. We've been working on a resolution. We've got a resolution here tonight that we're putting the finishing touches on. We plan to file that tomorrow, but really it's all about compelling DOJ to turn over documents so that we can do proper oversight. You know, if they have nothing to hide, turn over the documents. Jim's exactly right. This is just inexcusable.
Okay, so what happens? That is a resolution to compel the production of documents. Haven't you already been?
Well, we've subpoenaed them already.
Yeah.
And
what is that resolution? Tell us what it is.
We're putting together a resolution we would frankly like to bring to the full House and have the House vote on. It's one thing for us to say. It's one thing for Chairman to subpoena. It's another thing if the House of Representatives would actually go on record and say, Mr. Rosenstein, we as the House, a majority of the House say, you're not giving us the information we need. And frankly, now that we have found out that you were threatening members of the committee staff, a standing committee in the House of Representatives.
They said it's for his defense. He's going to defend himself against your threatening to call him in contempt.
Well, Laura, let me just say
How does he defend himself if he
wants
can't
to defend himself? Let's come on tomorrow night. Let's let Rod Rosenstein come on with Jim and I. We'll lay out the facts. He can lay out his talking points.
I've invited him on the show.
And you know why he doesn't come on? Is they'd rather do private press releases to spin the narrative at midnight and try to act like they're complying. Listen, we've had a document out since November 3rd of last year asking for documents. We still don't have them. We have less than 60% of those documents.
Is this draft that you have, is it going to call for his removal? What is this?
No, it just calls for them to really produce the document.
What if they give you
obviously...
Well, they've been doing that all along. So if they do it again, then you at least have at the House spoken and say we want this information, and if they don't comply with it, then everything's still on the table. The same issues are still on the table. Contempt and those remedies are still on the table. But we're like, look, let's have the House take a vote and send a message that a majority of the House agrees with us that you should give us the information we as a separate and equal branch of government are entitled to get answers for the American people.
Are we talking impeachment of the deputy?
I mean, obviously that's still something we have in our toolbox, but we will have a vote. I'm here to tell you tonight, Laura, tell your viewers, we're going to have a vote on the House floor one way or another. We're going to have a vote, and we're going to make sure that we get those documents.
Rod Rosenstein last month called this extortion, basically. He will not give in to these demands.
How about extortion when you're threatening members of a standing committee, the House of Representatives, for doing their job? We know these individuals. I know who these guys are. They worked their tail off. These are the guys who helped put together that memo which talked about what went on at the FISA court and the fact they didn't tell the FISA court who paid for the dossier, and they didn't tell the FISA court that Christopher Steele had been fired by the FBI for leaking information. These are the guys who put that together, and they're being threatened by Rod Rosenstein. This is as wrong as it gets.
What is your general thought on the constitutionality of this whole investigation? I mean, we've talked about this generally before. There are a lot of scholars who believe, and Dershowitz and a bunch of us have been, talking about this for months, that this entire special counsel seems like an unconstitutional undertaking. There's no real oversight. They essentially have a limitless budget, even though Congress appropriates. It seems like they have a limitless.
Well, they
budget.
do have a limitless.
And the
budget.
president really can't remove them, supposedly, because it's bad for politics. So, is there really any executive branch oversight if Rod Rosenstein himself is conflicted, as he's a witness?
Well,
basically?
he should recuse himself. I can tell you, just based on some of the facts we've seen, he should recuse himself. But that aside, in this country, you investigate crimes. You don't go in and start to investigate and see what you can find and hope to come up with a crime, after you've investigated. And that's not the way this special counsel is doing it. And I think it's wrong.
Didn't he say he was going to make the documents available to the so-called Gang of Eight?
That's supposed to happen tomorrow, but we'll see. Every time they say they're going to do something, they wind up not doing it or partially doing it.
No, their press release said they were going to do it today.
Oh, it was today. It was Tuesday.
Now it's going to happen Thursday.
Well, what is Gowdy and Ryan saying? Are they supporting you, McCarthy? Where are the leadership?
Yeah,
where are they?
We had discussions with the Speaker and Gowdy.
Where are they?
In fact, this evening. Well, I think they want to give more time.
They're nervous
They want to give more time. But the facts are on our side. Is how long is long enough? And I'm saying today is long enough.
Justice delayed is justice denied, perhaps.
Well said. Well said.
Thanks for coming on.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank
really
you, Laura.
Appreciate it. Hey, guys, at least the DOJ is doing something encouraging. Well, we're going to tell you the new rules that are going to stop illegal immigrants from gaming the asylum system. It's about time. That's next. Escaping persecution, not just gaming our system. Sessions announced a new DOJ policy that requires immigrants seeking asylum to prove that they are not just fleeing crime or gang violence. So let's debate this crucial change to our immigration policy with Alan Orr, an immigration attorney, and former immigration judge Art Arthur of the Center for Immigration Studies. All right, let's go to Alan first. Alan, I know there are a lot of people who are waving their arms like, oh my gosh, this is the persecuted people are not going to get any relief now. They're going to be shut out of our system. But I think what he's referencing is an 872% increase in applications for asylum since 2009 in the United States. That is a massive increase with not a correlating fact pattern that would indicate that we have that many more thousands of people who have legitimate claims.
Right, but I don't think that really the numbers should affect due process and justice, right? So that's not how we handle due process and justice, by numbers. It's a process. And so what Sessions has done goes with the narrative you just said before about making wrong decisions, because he's basically undid 20 years of precedent law of other judges within the immigration system. And I'm happy to be here with Art today because he's one of the outliers who basically says this is a good decision, whereas there's 16 others that say this is the wrong decision for the reasons you've enumerated, and that each case is a case-by-case judgment. And so what it doesn't do is sort of clear the backlog. What it does is send a message to the current officers at the port of entry to say, please start denying these claims for persecution. But what it doesn't immediately do is give us a remedy to the numbers that you discussed.
Now, Art.
In 2005, Congress made it clear that in order to be granted asylum, the persecution that you allege has to be at least one central reason for the harm that you fear. And that's a huge change. And quite frankly, it's taken 13 years for the Department of Justice to actually apply that to these crime-based
Okay, let's
claims.
go through that again. It has to be one central reason.
At least one central reason for the harm that you fear has to be one of the 5 characteristics for asylum: race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion. In this particular instance, it's membership in a particular social group. And that particular social group in the Attorney General's decision was people who were fearing crime in their home country.
Because that's not what you traditionally think of. I mean, and you're the expert here, I'm not, but when you think of persecution, having a horrible husband who's beating you up or a wife who's beating you up, that doesn't seem like that seems like regular old garden variety crime.
Persecution is generally harm that's inflicted on you by the government.
For your identity, or your belief system.
Or your belief system. But unfortunately, the membership in a particular social group is completely amorphous. And there have been many years of law, and that law was actually applied properly by Jeff Sessions to individuals who would fear crime in their home countries. Quite frankly, they don't have an asylum fear, they have a crime fear. And their home country needs to address that.
Alan, another thing that I hadn't heard of, Alan, just one question. The other thing I hadn't heard of before is the defensive use of asylum claims. I talked about this morning on the radio, that when people are about to be deported, sometimes, well, oftentimes, they then say, oh, wait a second, I have an asylum claim. And so it's now defensively used against the government in those situations, which is also, numbers don't matter, but it's kind of some kind of empirical proof that someone's getting information from some very smart lawyer to make this kind of claim when you're already a deportable alien under U.S. immigration law.
Well, really, that's part of the problem. A lot of the people are robbed without having a lawyer. So therefore, they might have heard things from people, across the way, but many of them are robbed without a lawyer and sort of handling these cases on their own and really talking about their experience. And if you're a battered female or battered woman or battered mother with your kids and you're having this intense legal conversation with the CBP officer to discuss what your level of fear is, you can see the problem that they're mostly going to discuss about how many times they were beaten, how many times they were struck, how many times they've been harmed. And so it isn't, and that's why it's a case-by-case analysis. And what Sessions has basically done is he's removed the whole sort of case-by-case analysis and said, look, I don't think anyone who's coming here, if it's a private actor, then this isn't persecution. And that's not what the case law says today, because really what we say is it's the inaction, right? It's the governments who are not stepping in to protect their citizens. It's the governments who are allowing this to happen, this
That's
sort of thing that also participate in the system.
Yeah, that's a lot of people around the world. I mean, I was stunned.
Well, actually, if we're talking about the number of cases we have,
yeah, I'm just saying.
It's about 2% of the total population, 0.2% of the total population.
And I disagree with when he's talking about this. The Attorney General is not completely closing the door to these claims, but what he's saying is that these claims need to be assessed the way that every other particular social group.
How do you ever assess it when someone comes from Guatemala and says my brother beat me up or my husband? How do you go to like the local sheriff in Guatemala? I mean, I've been to Guatemala many times. You can't get the records all that easily there.
Well, you can rely upon the statements of the alien in order to establish the claim.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
And the information we know about the countries.
We'll have you back. Love both of you. And by the way, they were making history in Singapore yesterday, as we were talking about earlier, finding some, hilarious moments of comic relief. Yes, stay right there, and we'll share them in just a moment with Raymond Arroyo.
It's the Father's Day sale at Ace. Save $100 on what Dad really wants. The best brands. That's